This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it is time for Care Notes with Doug Wilber. And before I forget, I want to make sure that all of you that are listening, um, especially if you're listening in the next 24 hours or so, this is holiday time. It's Christmas and Hanukkah and Kwanzaa. And I read somewhere there's like 23 different holidays in
Hmm.
December. Um,
Yeah.
we all, you know, pick and choose which holidays we celebrate. In fact, we celebrate both Christmas and Hanukkah, and I celebrate December 21st because it's the last day that we're going to have less sunlight. Because
Mhm.
starting on December 22nd, it's going to start getting lighter by seconds. So, Doug, how does this affect um, you know, people who, need assisted living of some sort? Um, they're still in their home, but the holiday comes along and maybe family doesn't feel comfortable, bringing mom and dad over to their house. And now you have a caregiver who's sitting with them on the holiday. Um,
Mhm.
how can we help the caregiver and the elderly still enjoy the day?
Yeah, the this time of year is pretty interesting because, as you mentioned, there are several factors. The major holidays are around this time, and also the amount of sunlight. So, it it should not escape us that the number one day with the highest number of deaths is Christmas Day. And and you kind of say, well, why is that? Well, I think there's a lot of reasons for it. I think one is this is a time of year that there's a lot of depression. Uh, um, there's also a lot of joy and there's a lot of happiness, but there is depression that oftentimes go with that, and because we think often of our losses during this time.
Sure.
And the older you get, the more losses you'll start accumulating, or more regrets, or more sadness that can oftentimes happen. So um, I know that there's kind of a phenomena um, that happens, and that is that a day that may have had a lot of joy and a lot of happiness in someone's life, if you can't celebrate it the way you used to,
Exactly.
all you have is the loss that you feel with that. Like, oh my gosh, I don't have what I once had. I don't have my spouse here with me, and I loved spending Christmas or cooking for my children and my husband, and now I can't do that anymore. Or even if I am able to do it, I don't have anyone to actually share it with.
Right.
And think about the friends and the gatherings, and your parents that have gone, even if it was many years ago, and all those memories flood in. And so for a lot of people this can be a really sad time. You couple that with the amount of light, and we know that in Ohio, the seasonal affective disorder is huge,
Right.
and it's huge because, for about 6 months we have clouds, and there aren't many places like uh, Cleveland with the amount of cloud cover that we get. Seattle is similar, and there's a handful of other cities, but in the Cleveland area, we really do have that a lake effect clouds, even if it isn't lake effect snow. And so we have long periods of time, not only where the sun is or the sunlight has shortened, but also what little sunlight we do have has even shortened further because
Yes,
the
right.
fact is cloudy, so it even looks depressing a lot of times. And for some people that's not a big deal, but for others it's huge. And but nationally we also see this as an issue, and again, I really attribute it to two factors. The one factor being the amount of sunlight. I actually think that's probably a bigger part of it. And the second factor, all of the depression that can happen to a lot of people. So, one of the things I do believe that is a characteristic of people that live longer, and I think we've talked about this before, is when they're able to have new friendships, new relationships that they develop. And those people that I see that do really well into old age um, tend to be people who continue to develop relationships, tend to be people who build new friendships, and they're not just kind of stuck with people. And they have, people that are older than them, people that are younger than them that they remain friends with or they gain friendships with, and so they tend to keep a vibrancy.
Right.
And so I think in a similar way, not only gathering around friends or that social support that is a part of that, but also kind of creating new memories. In other words, how can we bring the joy back into the holidays and the joy back into Christmas or Hanukkah, and just kind of live
Right.
new memories. And I think that's one of the ways that oftentimes a caregiver can play a big role. And I think, and let's go broad with caregiver. Let's not just mean the professional caregivers that we have. And we'll unpack that a little bit later. But I would also say, the caregivers that are in the life, those that are supporting that person to be able to remain at home or remain, uh, doing well in aging, that we need to have a group of people that are like encouraging that.
Oh,
Let's,
absolutely.
can we make cookies? And I don't care if cookies is you go and get the Pillsbury dough thing and you cut it and you throw it in the oven, those sugar cookies, and make that, that it may not be the same, but it's relatively easy to do.
Right.
And they get fresh cookies.
Yes.
So, doing that, encouraging and taking your parents out to see the Christmas lights. If you can get them into a car, drive them someplace where they can get new experiences, where that fits into their abilities. And watching an old movie together, like It's a Wonderful Life,
Yep.
that having popcorn, doing things like that, maybe that the person's still able to do, so that you bring in new memories. And again, we don't want to be stuck in old, just like what we've done in the past. We want to create new. And um and I think a goal that each of us should have in our lives, this is my feeling, is how can we live life every day? If we see life as a gift, and I see life as a gift, y- you know, if it's a gift, how do we experience the joy of every day? And that means looking at things afresh, anew, in a different way, trying to gain new experiences, living the life that we have while we have life in our bodies. And I don't care if someone's bedbound, they can still do that. Um, it, so so, but I think that's kind of a group effect. where, whoever the caregiver is in someone's life, we should be considering doing that.
As I'm listening to you, it reminds me of when my mother-in-law passed away in 2007. She passed away just like 5 days before Christmas. And even though my husband and I took it hard, my son took it the hardest
Mm,
because Bran Christmas morning was always at our house, no matter what. Um, and she would go to my brother-in-law's house during the afternoon, and in the evening, we would go back to her house. And so there was a pattern of what we were doing. And that first Christmas, my son just looked at us and he said, "What are we going to do now?"
mm,
And my husband and I looked at each other and we didn't know what to tell him. And he was a young adult at the time. So it's not like, he was this little boy. And we finally just said, well, you know what we're going to do? We're going to still have our Christmas morning breakfast, but we're going to go to a movie in the afternoon. And we
yeah,
broke it up. And we did that for a number of years. Um, and then we've changed it up a little bit since then. And I think for us, that really has worked well because every year it's just a little bit different.
yeah,
And therefore, you know, yes, do we miss something from the past? Absolutely. But we can then go back and say, this is sort of fun too. And I
yeah,
think it's what caregivers, whether, like you said, family or hired caregivers, can offer as well, because we have to remember caregivers, whether family or hired, um, they're giving up something as well. And
mhm.
if they can just get a little bit of spark for themselves, I think that's extremely important.
Oh yeah, yeah, and you know, a lot of we do have a number of caregivers that will work on the holidays. Some do it because they really have a servant's heart. They just say, you know what, I have the ability, I can do it. I want to make a difference in someone else's life with that, and they get their joy by giving,
Right.
and so that's a part of it. But and some of the caregivers, they also have had maybe some loss. They don't have their spouse anymore and think, okay, I'm going to do this and bring joy in someone else's life because I can't experience the same thing. And this is kind of a side note, but I do think that we need that the families of the caregivers that are in there really need to acknowledge what that person is doing on that day, um,
Absolutely.
because they could be celebrating elsewhere. They could be doing things with others, and they have chosen to spend their day with your loved one,
Right.
and to give and serve and to make a difference. And I think, if you haven't thought about it, you need to think about, how can I make it special for them? How can I acknowledge what they're doing, and do something a little bit extraordinary, a little bit, um, uh, uh, I guess, uh, a little bit, um, magnificent for that person. I'm trying to capture this specific word, but something that is above and beyond,
Sure.
you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah, extravagant, I guess, is really, is probably the best word, so that person can feel the appreciation that you have for them for doing what they've done. Because they may be also having that sadness or the other things as they're doing, and this is, a means for them to give and to make a difference in someone else's life because they can't experience what they'd like to experience. And a lot of our caregivers have expressed the joy that they get by giving. And I think that um, to acknowledge, to appreciate, to be giving with our praise or our acknowledgement is such a huge thing, because I do think that does make a difference for those individuals.
And
Yeah,
I think it's also important to remember if, we're taking our family out and bringing them into a large family gathering. Um, I think it's important for us to realize that it's not okay just to have mom or dad sit on a chair and be there
yeah,
to engage with them. And it reminds me of, you know, when I was a little kid and my grandmother would come. My grandmother had a heart condition my whole life. So I knew her as somebody who was always going to the hospital with some sort of heart ailment. And my mother always would say to me, "You go sit with grandma." And it used to bother me because I wanted to play with my cousins.
right, yeah,
And now I look back at that and realize we all should have been sitting with grandma and talking to grandma. And I think it's something that we don't think about that, oh, well, grandma or grandpa are here, or, great aunt is here. You know, she should be happy she's here, but we're going to just go off and talk about something else, or we're going to play on our iPads or text on our phones. So just
yeah.
keep it in mind that, you know, engaging with each other is so, so important. And like you said, this is a time of year that I don't know if people can really just give up and pass away. Um, but it seems like that happens.
Yeah.
And if we're not engaging and understanding what they need, and we all need the same thing, we all want affection and love and know that people care.
Yeah, I think I think the last time we had a discussion, I may have mentioned this, but the idea that as people age, they feel like they are invisible or they've disappeared,
Right.
and and that I'm just not relevant anymore. And if someone's sensitive, they will sense it because it's true. I mean, it's not true that they're not relevant, but it's true that people kind of look beyond them. And the perfect example is the family gathering where that person is just sitting there, and the kids are kind of oblivious to it. And frankly, the only way that most and not all kids, sometimes you have these extraordinary kids, and they are the kids that have this ability to kind of see beyond the wrinkles
Right. Yep.
and the age, and they see that person for who they are, and it is a gift. It is truly a gift. And some people have that from a very early age. Other people, they truly have to develop that. And the only way you develop it is by being like what your mom, who was a
Right.
good mom, if she did that, says you sit with your grandma
Right.
and you talk to her. And I mean, frankly, that's civilization, isn't it?
Yep.
I
Oh,
mean,
absolutely. Yes.
how do we teach our values? You make people do things that they are uncomfortable with, or you take them alongside and you help them see it, or say this is how we do it. You correct someone, and so the I will tell you that one of the greatest tragedies of this, especially the 60s, is when so much got rejected, and then people started realizing, oh, we shouldn't have rejected that.
Exactly.
We that kind of impulse that we can create, nirvana, utopia by just rejecting what the traditions have been, ended up, creating awful things. And one of it is that thing that created civilization, which is you teach the next generation. And so, it is important for, the kids of someone to, be forced, to interact with their grandparents, with their great aunts and great uncles and others, that is really a valuable thing. And I will tell you, my kids had a lot of interaction with their grandparents, and I think they have an appreciation that they would not have had otherwise because of that. And I think that, and they, I think they have hearts of compassion, and they, are able to open their hearts, and kind of go into uncomfortable, zones sometimes
Right,
because of that.
exactly. Well, I
Yeah.
was lucky. My mother's father lived with us for about a year. Um, and it wasn't the most comfortable situation for all of us at the time, but he would sit in the living room and he would say to my middle brother, "Do you speak Yiddish?" And he knew that we didn't, my parents did, but my brothers and I didn't. And my brother Joel would say yes. And he learned how to speak Yiddish because he would copy my grandfather. And I used
No.
to sit there mesmerized. Now, I didn't learn it, okay, but I just remembered that warm connection between the two of them.
Yeah.
And, you know, I was always willing to be in the same room when this was going on because I thought I was learning something. And sadly, I didn't learn a thing other than the compassion. But
And maybe some of the bad words.
but I think it's I think you are so right that some of us um, grow up and we don't see the wrinkles in the aging process. They're just part of our family. And yet there are others, maybe because of distance or whatever, um, you know, grandma or grandpa just seem to be ancient people. Um,
Yeah.
and so there's a disconnect, but it is up to the parents, truthfully, to
Oh, yeah.
because I learned so much from my grandparents that uh, I find myself repeating things recently that, oh, I know who told me that.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the lessons that you learn from your grandparents are very significant. It's interesting, that there are very few animals that live in it. That so it, it's it with humans. The number of years that a, a woman will live after menopause is really significant. Okay. Um, Very few, if animals, follow that pattern. Okay. Where with menopause, typically what'll happen is very quickly after that, the animal dies. Okay.
Okay.
Not with humans. Why were we created that way? Why is it that we do it? Because I believe, and this isn't my thought, this has actually come, something that I read, and I thought that's really profound. Um, but the number of years that, uh, um, come after that is because with humans, with people, with with our group,
Right.
um, we need our grandparents.
We do.
And that is, when you see that in nature, you see that there is a reason for it. So we need our elders, and if we don't understand how much we need our elders, there would be no other reason why people live as
But
long as they do. And it's specifically the grandchildren and the children that still need their elders in it.
absolutely.
It's not irrelevant that it's structured that way. And I think specifically it's structured in such a way that the grandparents are supposed to be involved in their grandchildren's lives. That or that we're not just kind of a one generation. We're a
Right.
multi-generation creation,
I love
and
that.
yeah, and that is really important. Um, because if we reject it, it will be at our own detriment yeah, that happens. Anyway, we started out talking about the holidays, and
Right.
and frankly, that's why having your grandparents or your parents, over for the holidays, and your kids recognize that, or is actually a really plays a really important role on
Absolutely.
tradition and on other things. I mean, I remember, spending, Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, with the traditions that we had, and talking with the elders and in it, and just getting these stories and
Yes.
just being, fascinated by it, and laughing and enjoying that whole process. And I can't imagine my life without that. I actually understand, like, what in my case, like, what did life look like in the or early 20th century, the early 1900s. um I actually kind of have a feel for what that was like, and how life was different, because I actually heard the stories.
Yes.
Um, so the part of it is, with this, is that shared um, memories, the creating of new memories, and the imparting of old memories, that occur during that time, is going to benefit both generations, if in this. And so the caregiver is not without benefit. The family caregiver that is helping their parent is gaining something in the process.
Absolutely.
Yeah, of taking care of the others. So yeah.
Well, I'm hoping that all our caregivers, family members can have a wonderful holiday. Um, and maybe if we start engaging as of today and keep them, in our thoughts and let them know that they still are special. Uh, one thing I will say when you were talking about stories, when I was 9 years old, my grandfather told me how he came to America twice. He came first and ended up in Boston with cousins who sponsored him, and he ran away from the Cossacks in Russia. And he
Hmm.
left his wife with the baby behind. When he went back to Russia to bring her back, not only did she have the baby, but he didn't know she was pregnant when he left. And
Oh,
so, and as he told me these stories, it was like I never would have known. And this all happened way before my mother's was born. And so it was just so nice to hear his version. And of course, my mother repeated his version many times and it constantly got changed. But it's just wonderful to know what your family, where they came from, what they've done. And the survival mechanism. So, um,
Yeah. Yeah, no, I believe that that the holidays are a really important time and a really important part of our lives. That recognizing different days and celebrating things that are from our histories, that are usually around that. And I do really highly recommend that we don't forget what the meaning of those holidays are. We actually go to the roots of that while we're doing the other part, because so much of life is comes down to our roots, our parents, our holidays, our special moments in lives, so that we celebrate those times. And um, that one of the curses, and I really believe there is a part of the whole um, uh, situation that happened with COVID, that we lost a lot during there, and we need to reclaim it. We really do. The isolation that happened, and the death that happened from that isolation, is really horrible, and we need to regain that, and we need to take that back in our lives. And part of that is restoring those holiday traditions and restoring some of those things that to this day have not fully come back in so many situations in the same way, that they were being celebrated or done beforehand. And you know and um, so let's celebrate together. Let's celebrate with our family members. Let's honor those that are giving their day up in order to do it, and include them in the celebrations that we're having. Make them a part of the family for that day. And I hope everyone has just the greatest of Christmases and Hanukkah and celebrations that people are doing this time of year, and the new year. So, all right.
we will see you next year.
All
Have
right.
a
Sounds good.
great day. Bye bye
You
now.
too. Bye bye.